Welcome to the Sports Note for Friday, March 1st, and we're starting to see all too commonplace anymore the court storming, especially in college basketball. We see it quite a bit in college football as well, but not to this level in recent years. And yeah, we are seeing a lot more upsets, which on one hand, some people might think, kind of deserved, but at this point, enough starting to pretty much get enough. If you've read the blog, I led it off by saying the court storming anymore is becoming equivalent to diamonds. Is that the more you see them, the cheaper they get. To where you actually saw Caitlin Clark at Iowa get bumped into back in late January by an Ohio State fan after Ohio State upset Iowa. But even just this past Saturday, you saw Wake Forest take down Duke, and the fans rushed the court, and it actually ended up with Duke forward Kyle Filipowski suffering a minor knee injury. Now, Filipowski didn't really miss any time. He played 29 minutes in Duke's following game on Thursday night against Louisville, a game that they handily won 84-59. He only scored 9 points, did snag 10 rebounds, but it's definitely something that was the main focal point. Is number one, how Duke would react after losing to unwake Wake Forest, and number two, just going out and handling their business, to Louisville in the wake of what most of the sports world was talking about. Was the fact that you actually had a prominent player in Filipowski become injured by this court storming. So there's got to be something that the NCAA has to do going forward. We've seen it way, way, way too often. Iowa has pretty much been one of the top three teams in men's college basketball all season long. They've been upset 3 times on the road this year: at Northwestern, at Wisconsin, at Ohio State. And the Ohio State one was probably the most significant because it was the first game after Ohio State fired head coach Chris Holtzman. And Ohio State's going absolutely nowhere this year, but the fans rushed the court in all 3 instances. Iowa's been a victim of that with naturally with the profile on Caitlin Clark. There's larger crowds than there have been at a lot of college basketball games, especially road games, in a long time. Naturally, it's normal for Duke to sell out games at home, for Iowa's women to sell out games at home, for UConn's women to sell out games at home. College football games with your major powers are always sold out, and you still get those field rushings. But it's not just the player safety you have to keep in mind. Also think it's what it's going to cost the university. As we've all seen in recent years, when fans storm the field in college football after a big win, you don't see the goalposts writ down anymore, just because the university have taken a lot more initiative about changing things up to where it's almost impossible to rip those things out anymore and take them out of the stadium. But there were shots after the Wake Forest upset of Duke that you had students on the floor, and then you also had some of them like trying to climb up the backboard. What happens if the hydraulic to that stanchion snaps, and then you've got that 300-400 pound goal coming down on a group of anywhere between 8 and 15 younger adults, primarily, because that's who's going to be the first ones to storm the court, is going to be the student section. What happens if somebody is up on somebody else's shoulders trying to reach up and grab the rim to be able to pull themselves onto the backboard? What happens if their weight, just with the angle that they're doing it from, and that rim snaps the glass, and then not only do they come down with that rim, they could end up hurting someone because it's metal, but also that glass showering out there as well. Even though it is tempered glass and it's kind of safety glass, it's still something that you can still be cut in it, especially if it's going to land in somebody's hair and then you're trying to get it out later. So you've got that aspect to take into consideration. So the cost of replacing that goal, and then any injuries that may be succumbed to by the students, or really any other fans. We've seen instances of reports, the ESPN story that came out earlier in the week, that you had you had some coaches, some football coaches at some schools wondering, hey, do we rush the floor if they win this, as they were in attendance at some of those basketball games. You've seen um, students posting stories or video of them taking the court, um, but there's it's an underlying condition that, yeah, it kind of looks cool on camera. Yeah, you actually kind of, there's parts of you that wishes it was, you there, especially if it's a team you really don't like, um just for the experience. But what actually happened to the idea of you're not allowed to be on the field of play at any point when you're in that stadium unless you're authorized to be there? Just, fans jumping over barricades at football stadiums, rushing the turf. For those teams that play on natural grass, you have something like that. Who's to say that it doesn't damage the field to where, they've actually you got to spend now as the university the money for the landscaping to be able to replace some of that sod, or you've got to redo the plastic pellets if they play on turf. If you ask a security guard, hey, can you maybe accompany me out onto the floor if I wanted to get a photo or something like that? Security guard might say no, not without a pass. Some may actually say okay, but make it quick, something like that. It kind of really just kind of depends on the atmosphere that you're in, how long you wait after the game for things to clear out. Naturally, it's going to happen a lot easier at a basketball game where you've only got 14, 15, 16,000 people, as opposed to 60, 70, 80,000 at a football game. Even if you've got some of your mid-major um, football schools that are still drawing 25, 30, 40,000 at those, that's still a very decent size sea of humanity that you've got to work through. If you're gonna, if the NCAA is going to allow the courts to continue being stormed like this, they have to start putting in better regulations and better safety protocols, because we know for the fact that you have on any given Sunday in the NFL, you've got a maximum of 16 stadiums in major markets that you can bring all the riot gear, and police presence and security to be able to make sure that these fans are kept off the field. It at one thing, but you've got anywhere between 40 and 70 stadiums just at the Division I level on Saturdays that could be having that, in addition to that same amount in college basketball arenas once the season shifts over. So it's almost impossible for something like that to happen, especially if you got two schools that are in close proximity to each other. If you've got North Carolina and Duke playing home games the same night, again, 8-mile difference there, you're not going to be able to actually have the resources available for something like that, to be completely eliminated. Do they actually, tell the fans, hold off, let's get the opposing team off off the court, so this way their players, their coaches are in a safer, spot? Do we let them kind of get to the sideline, first before you rush the field? Do we actually have security come out and completely barricade them off? Do we actually have them do the handshake line in the tunnel or in the locker room after the game? Where exactly do we draw the line? Because if Clark was dinged and everyone gasped when that happened as she was approaching the scoring record, and then Filipowski getting injured here when Duke's still ranked 10th and still in the hunt for a national championship this year, and Iowa also being currently ranked 6th, and going to possibly be looking at a Final Four. Where exactly does it stop? Now, granted, we're running out of time here for this season, to where we may not see it too many more times. We may actually see it at some of the smaller one bid type conferences, because your larger conferences, your ACCs, SECs, Big Tens, Pac-12, the final year of it, they always have their games at neutral sites. So you're not going to see fans rushing the floor at Indianapolis at the Big Ten tournament. You're not going to see, fans rushing the floor in Greensboro for the ACC tournament. Because of the fact that you're going to have so many different schools being represented all at once. So the chances of that happening are very, very slim. When you actually start getting to, the NCAA tournament itself coming up here in a couple of weeks, you're also not going to see that, because, again, all the different schools being represented at that site at that time. But the only mobbings you're going to see are going to be the media flooding, and that's relatively normal, because you'd rather actually deal with maybe, 40, 50 media, kind of rushing the court, and mascots and cheerleaders, and spirit section, kind of hitting the floor, as opposed to tens of thousands of people at a football game, and easily, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 fans that you can possibly cram onto a floor at a college basketball game. The SEC is about the only conference, as much flack as they get for other things. They have a policy that I'd like to see more conferences starting to adapt to, where if you rush the floor, your school is fined $100,000, and that fine is paid to the opposing school. Kentucky lost back-to-back road games earlier this season. I want to say it was back-to-back. It was certainly in a very short time frame. Well, the second one of those was to LSU. LSU gets hit with a $100,000 fine. Kentucky gets that $100,000 fine. And one of the people that was a part of the mob, admittedly, for LSU when they won that game on a buzzer beater, was current forward Angel Reese, who was one of the key components to LSU's run to the national championship last year. And in a backdoor kind of way, is part of the Caitlin Clark story, because of the trash talking that happened between Reese and Clark, leading through the Final Four and also through the national championship game. And then Clark getting bumped by a court rush, and Reese being a part of a court rush here. So let me know what you guys think. Stay or go? Do they need to regulate this a little? Do they need to back off? Am I and others like Stephen A. Smith or Jay Billis or Seth Greenberg on ESPN coming off as get off my lawn guy? Do you think that there's a way that they can kind of do this safely, to where we don't have a potential incident like this? Mike and I will be with you Saturday night for the Wise Guy Sports Show. We should be joined by our buddy John Rice, and I will be back with you guys before too long. Take care.